Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Season 10, Episode 6 of the DFO Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Brock Seegan. With me, as always, we got Dylan D. Birthday Man, Michael Beebs, Bonnie. This, fellas, is the final positional preview episode of the preseason. The people have been speaking and really appreciate all the legwork we've been putting in and getting them ready for the preseason. So hopefully we can knock this goalies episode out of the park to cap things off. Before I throw it to you, fellas, I just want to let everybody know that goalies are voodoo. And this episode is a little bit different than the other ones. The other ones, it is a little bit easier to find diamonds in the rough and dig deep and find statistical anomalies and find some players that, you know, other people might not be paying attention to. Goalies are a little bit more difficult. It's very difficult to predict. A lot of it, we will say this many times on today's show, has to do with just the team that you play for. And so we will be referencing kind of the team projected point totals according to the sports books quite often as well, in addition to how good the goalie is. But D, you every year basically try to just skip this episode entirely because goalies are just impossible to talk about. But welcome in. You made it. Happy to have you.
Appreciate you. Yeah, we were talking before the show that these goalies basically fall into three buckets. They're either a good goalie on a good team, they're a good goalie on a bad team, or they're a bad goalie on a good team. And that's really is kind of the way you need to look at it. I think when it comes down to finding some guys that, you can really extract some value out of on draft day, it's more about pinpointing guys that you think can potentially work their way into a position that maybe they're not really forecasted for to start the year. So we'll be looking at guys that might carry a little bit more weight in terms of their starting workload than the general public seems to think, and obviously targeting guys that are at the very least on some competitive teams, because we know all the stud goalies on the best teams are going to go early. So that's what it's going to be about. That's the name of the game. And of course, the most volatile position in hockey. So we will see how it all plays out, but at least we have an idea of a good starting point.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, we're choosing between 64-ish or so players. Maybe a couple more, some third stringers make it in. And that leaves it kind of limited. But with that said, we're going to give you some tips. We're going to get you set in net. I am Beebs here, and it is good to be here on our final positional preview. As Brock mentioned, we appreciate, as much as we've been putting in the legwork, we appreciate you guys putting in that earwork and just giving us. It's been awesome so far to start the year. We've got a lot of positive feedback. So with that said, I think it's time we get a little voodoo-y here, fellas. And shall we focus on some tendies?
I can always leave it up to you to say something just completely outrageous like earwork. D, I think you forgot one bucket, and that it's bad goalies on bad teams. Those do exist as well. We probably won't talk about too many of those today. But all right, let's jump in again. If you haven't tuned in thus far, this is the first episode you've landed on. Our positional preview episodes, we go through and give you our consensus top 10 at the position, also some value picks, some breakouts, and some ADPs to avoid, otherwise known as fades. If you really don't like a guy, we can call him a bust. But if this is the first episode you've listened to, do yourself a service, go back, listen to the centers, left wing, right wing, and D episodes as well. Get yourself as prepared as possible for the show. Also, if you are listening on wherever you get podcasts, the show is now available on YouTube as well. So if you'd rather take a look at us, we've had some hilarious comments on YouTube this week. People that have been listening to the show forever. Some people said we just look nothing like the images they had in their brain, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
not one David Spade comment about me, so I'm considering that a total win personally.
One person attacked D for being a Travis Kelce copycat, but I don't think that's the look he's going for. It just so happens
that's a first. I'll say that.
But all right, let's get into our top 10. Coming in at number 1 is Igor Shesterkin. He is the number 1 goalie off the board as well. ADP is currently 16.8. Beebs and Dylan both have him at number 1. I am a little bit different. I've got him at number 2. But Shesterkin has won 36 plus games for 3 straight seasons, but had a worst save percentage. The worst save percentage at .912 of his career. Worst save percentage being .912 is saying something, but over the last 3 seasons combined, he leads the NHL in wins. He's second in save percentage and shutouts, third in goals against average. So he's just been an absolute stallion between the pipes for the Rangers, who have the 8th highest projected point total in the NHL this year at 105. not really a whole lot to say about Igor Shesterkin. He plays a lot. He wins a lot. He's very, very good. We saw him, I guess, maybe have a little bit more of a challenge last year in terms of getting starts because Jonathan Quick kind of surprised everybody and played very, very well, at least early in the season, and then tailed off and was more of the Jonathan Quick we all kind of expected. And then Shesterkin saw some more starts down the stretch, ended up finishing with 55, which is pretty similar to what we've seen in years past. But yeah, you guys both have him at 1. D, we might as well start with you here. Anything to add on why you have Igor Shesterkin at 1?
Yeah, I think he quite clearly leads the good goalie, good team bucket that we talked about earlier, right? He just consistently delivers performances, even with his own individual splits above season or league average, I should say, which is really all you can ask for, especially when you have the goal support that he'll get all season long with the Rangers. Obviously, you have that really nice upside from a couple seasons ago when he hit that 935 and took home the Vezina. So you know he's got that in him as well, but just really consistent even outside of that one crazy year. The one knock on him compared to some of the other guys we'll talk up here in like kind of the top 5 is he doesn't get quite as much work. It's not a huge difference, but as you said, been right around 55 starts the last few seasons. The other guys will creep into the 60s. Who knows if that continues this year? You know, if Quick comes back down to earth a little bit, we might see Shesterkin hit 60 starts for the first time. I think they're happy to limit that workload a little bit, keep them fresh for the playoffs if they can. So I think that'll be the goal for them, and it would kind of be forcing their hand if they do have to give him any more work. So that's really the only knock that you can give on Shesterkin. I will say all of these guys, it's just too much draft capital for me for these top, I don't even know, 5 or 6 guys. With how volatile the position is, how many injuries we see there year in, year out, you can really just kind of, I find, fade the position early on, maybe get yourself 1 or 2 really reliable starters come draft day. And then work in some guys that are going to be kind of 1Bs and then just play the waiver wire. Because every time one of these big names gets hurt, that's on a really good team with really good goal support, even if they're not going to deliver lights out splits, they're going to become a very valuable fantasy asset. So you can get a lot of value for this position off the wire, which is why I don't love investing heavy draft capital into the position. So Shesterkin, for example, going in the middle of the second round, there's no way that I'm going to end up with him just based on how I like to approach the game. But nevertheless, I do think he's the most valuable fantasy goaltender going into the season.
I actually left the draft last year with Shesterkin and Vasilevskiy and Adin Hill, and I thought I was just going to dominate goaltending categories, and it turned out to be an absolute nightmare for me, fellas. In the early part of the year, Hill got hurt. The other two couldn't stop. Well, Vasilevskiy was hurt to start the year as well, but when he came back, it was just tough. And like Dee said, you can usually find guys who can have comparable stats. For me, what pushed Shesterkin just above our number 2 guy here is the final 22 games of last year. Shesterkin was 16-5-1 with a .930 save percentage and 4 shutouts. And that just so happened to be right during the fantasy playoffs. And it did some wonders for a lot of managers who kind of stuck strong with, I mean, you're sticking strong with the previous year's Vezina winner. But with that said, I mean, this guy was taking matchups left and right when it came down to the time that we needed him out there. And I think he's more of a, maybe not a .930 goalie, but a .920 goalie. And to prove he can do it for a quarter of last year just shows that, you know, he's got it in the bag after doing it a full year before. So I think it was just a little bit of an anomaly to start last year. And with that, it's kind of that ceiling that pushes him above number 2 for me here. But like Dee said, you know, it's kind of it's whatever. I'm not going to have either of these goalies. But if you do come down to the choice, I think Brock's going to make a case on why number 2 should go ahead of number 1. But that's my case for why number 1 should go ahead of number 2.
Yeah, number 2 for us is Connor Hellebuyck. I've got him at 1. You guys both have him at 2. His ADP is 24.2, so at the very end of the second round, number 2 goalie off the board. So we're right in line with consensus there. Hellebuyck probably had the worst season of his career in 2022, 3 years ago, but he's been lights out in the 2 seasons since, winning 37 games in each of those 2 seasons with a 244 goals against average, a 921 save percentage, and 9 shutouts. He's second in starts, second in wins, second in save percentage, 5th in goals against average, and 1st in shutouts during those 2 seasons. He'll play as much as any goalie, and that will make up for the fact that he plays for a team that is projected to be about average this year, 16th highest projected point total in the league this year. But when you take a look at the grand scheme of things in terms of where these teams are projected in terms of points, it could be the difference between like 3 or 4 wins between Shesterkin and Hellebuyck. And Hellebuyck could start anywhere between 5 to 10 more games than Shesterkin this year. So goaltending wise, their talent level is pretty similar. I expect their splits to be pretty similar, but if at the end of the day, I expect Hellebuyck to be out there far more often than Shesterkin, and I think he could end up finishing the season with more wins than Shesterkin because he just plays more. So basically, splitting hairs here, I'd be happy to have either one of these guys on my team if the price was right, but I like just the fact that you can rely on Hellebuyck to get out there 64, 65 times a year, where you're looking at about 55 for Shesterkin. So, a couple extra starts per week, basically, with Hellebuyck, which is nice. Maybe not a couple per week, but you get what I'm saying. The one thing, too, that I wanted to just mention, a number that we'll reference periodically during today's show is quality starts or quality start percentage, which is, just an easy number to kind of look back and fall back on to grade how good goalies are. And just a quality start, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a start with a save percentage above the league average for that season. So over the last 3 seasons is the number that I'm going to be referencing for the most part. Quality start percentage for Shesterkin, 62.6. Quality start percentage for Hellebuyck over the last 3 seasons is 64.7. So marginally better there as well. I think they're both great goalies, but I prefer Hellebuyck a little bit. And then obviously, if you just factor in the ADP as well, the fact that you're getting him about 8 picks later is a nice addition as well. So Beebs, what do you think about Hellebuyck? Obviously, you like Shesterkin a little bit more, but is Hellebuyck a clear number 2 for you?
Yeah, Hellebuyck just clears the next name that we're going to look at. Just more on a been there, done that type basis. We saw last year him finish second in wins, which shows that he's going to be a top end in that category. He's going to help you in save percentage and goals against. He's not going to absolutely kill you. Also, if you're in a Cats league or a points league, then he's absolutely going to help you because he's going to face a ton of shots, and that's where those extra games might push him actually above Shesterkin for me. But for what we're talking about here, you mentioned it. He's going to get a ton of starts, but like you said, we got to look at those quality start numbers, and sometimes getting those 10 extra starts, if it's against high offensive juggernauts, it could be a little scary. And I guess I kind of just like the team a lot more in front of Shesterkin, and that can outweigh the 10 starts that less starts he might get there. And I just think the ceiling's a little bit high for Shesterkin, a little bit higher. But with that said, I think if we're comparing draft stock to actual talent and what you're getting, Hellebuyck's the better value. But yeah, he's clear number 2 for me here, and I think we'll probably be talking about him in top 3 for years to come. He's just a workhorse. It's what he does. Gets wins, stops the puck.
Yeah, I think from a splits perspective, it's hard to get more consistent than Hellebuyck's been. But I say this a lot. Basically all the stats that you're going to get from a goaltender in fantasy hockey, for the most part, they're team stats. Obviously, a goaltender's play will influence those, but the one thing that you're really chasing is wins. And I just feel, obviously, the Rangers are a better team heading into the season. I like the goal support you're getting there a lot more. Hellebuyck has always been consistent in his career, but even when he's faltered a little bit, we've seen the impact that has on his win total, right? Just a couple of seasons ago, that save percentage fell to 910, still above league average, but the win total in 66 starts sat at just 29. So I think it's more of a case where they really need him to be their best player if they're going to, be where they've been at in the standings over the last couple of years. And I don't think you can say the same for Shesterkin. So no one's above the volatility of this position. Again, we saw that a couple of years ago with Hellebuyck. So I just think he needs to be at his absolute best to return the stat lines that he has in recent years, where Shesterkin just has more leeway.
I do also think that Winnipeg might have taken some notes from last year. They walked into the playoffs and got absolutely slapped around by Colorado. And Hellebuyck looked kind of tired in those games. Granted, it would have been tough either way, but I think knowing that they have an actual serviceable backup, they may actually take some starts from this year. We might not see him go that deep now that they are a playoff team and not get that many starts. And I do worry about that, especially like D said, since his stats last year basically took him being pushed to the brink of what he can give you. So yeah, maybe Winnipeg being good might help hurt his fantasy stock a little bit.
I honestly think it's less of a concern now because they've got Kaapo-Kähkönen as his backup, who's probably below league average, and Laurent Brossoit last year was arguably the best backup in the league, and he still didn't play a ton. So I don't think they're like, that's just what this dude does. He just plays a lot of hockey, but basically splitting hairs here at the top, it gets a little bit more difficult here in the middle. Number 3 for us is Jake Oettinger. You guys both have him at number 3. I've got him at number 4. We are a little bit higher than consensus. He is the number 4 goalie off the board right now with an ADP of 30.5. Oettinger has won 30-plus games in 3 straight seasons, but his save percentage dipped a bit in 2024 from .916 in his first 3 seasons to .905. But most of his struggles came early on, and he started to figure it out midway through the season. He was 11-8-2 with a .901 save percentage in his first 22 games, but was 24-6-2 with a .909 save percentage in his final 32 games. From January 13th on, no goalie had more wins than Oettinger's 24. Shesterkin was second with 20. Dallas was a great team, obviously, last year, and not much has changed this year. They have the 3rd highest projected points this year. So he's an elite option. He obviously falls into that bucket of a good goalie on a good team, and you could argue that he's a great goalie on a great team.
Yeah, and I think last year just really speaks to his fantasy value, right? Like, as you said, had a relatively down year, posted a .905 right around league average, still managed to chalk out 35 wins in 53 starts, right? So I think that's kind of the floor you're getting with Oettinger. He showed a couple of years ago that he can put up really elite splits over an entire season when he did .919 and 62 appearances. So yeah, this is a guy who I think is very safe. Has the upside to maybe be the number 1 goalie in fantasy hockey come year end if he puts it all together like he did a couple of years ago. And still saw plenty of work last year, even though the overall starts went down. Most of that was due to an injury he suffered mid-season. The rate of which he was playing games was still right in line from a couple of years ago when he started 62 games. So I like Oettinger a lot. He's also got age on his side, right? We know that this is a position where regression will come at you fast. And sometimes out of seemingly nowhere. And I don't think you have to worry about that as much with Oettinger. And yeah, looked good in the postseason too, obviously. So I think this is a guy who, like I said, operated at his floor last year and still returned 35 wins. So I love the floor and the ceiling here with Oettinger, which is what gave him the nod for me over a couple of the other guys that we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, D, you said it. He's only 25 years old. He's got 193 games played under his belt at 25. And I'll remind people, just a few years ago, Jordan Binnington made his debut at 25. So just to show kind of, if you have 193 games under your belt at a position where most guys are just getting started, that's why I'm also there with you. I think the ceiling is right there. I think this might be the best team that he's ever had in front of him. Dallas looks very good. And with that, I mean, he was 1 point off of posting a .920 the year before. I think he's definitely capable and with a little bit more puck luck, able to get above that .920. With that, I could see him being right there with the wins leaders. I mean, he was just behind by 4 last year, so really not that far off. And he dealt with some early injuries last year, and it kind of seemed like that may have bled out into when he came back. And with a year of full health, I really think we could be in for something special here. And I totally fine with him being our number 4 goalie off the board, or sorry, number 3 goalie off the board here. I debated him and Hellebuyck just because of how good Dallas is. But I couldn't disrespect last year's Vezina winner like that. So that's why Oettinger is going 3 for me. But it was a no doubt 3. Although I know, Brock, you were a little bit different here.
D, your boy Casey DeSmith is now the backup in Dallas. Any concern that he could limit Oettinger's work a little bit? I mean, he wasn't great in Vancouver last year, but he's, for his career, he was better than what they had in Scott Wedgwood.
Yeah. No real concern. Like I said, even with DeSmith there last year, once Oettinger came back healthy, or not last year, but even with, some solid play from Scott Wedgwood, it wasn't spectacular. But it was enough where they were still winning games with him in there. And again, Wedgwood, another one of those guys who was actually a pretty valuable fantasy asset when he was between the pipes for them. It didn't impact the rate at which he was getting games too much. So I don't think it's going to be a mega threat. Maybe we'll see a few less starts than what we saw a couple of years ago, but I would still expect him to be somewhere between 55 and 60 starts at the minimum. If
you're interested in streaming goalies throughout the season, as Dee's referenced a couple times already, we do a daily starting goalie rankings. We've got a tool that helps you kind of pick who the best streaming options are. We provide the own percentage, if they're going to be available in your league and help you kind of navigate those waters. So if you do miss on some of these elite options and you do end up having to stream goalies, that's how Daily Faceoff makes money, baby. We make money off streaming goalies. So come on down, check out the daily goalie rankings to be sure. Number 4 off the board for us is Juuse Saros. I've got him at 3. You guys both have him at 4. I'm in line with ADP. He's going 3 picks ahead of Oettinger, ADP of 27.5, third goalie off the board. Juuse Saros got his bag in the offseason, 8 years, nearly $62 million. And the Predators traded Yaroslav Askarov to the San Jose Sharks so Saros can keep leading the NHL in games played like he has for 3 straight seasons. Saros plays more than anyone else and has arguably the best team he's ever had in front of him this year. The last 3 years, he is 2nd in wins, 7th in save percentage, and 19th in goals against average. Nashville enters this season 10th in projected point total, so Saros could push for 40-plus wins with how much this guy plays. If this team takes a big step forward this year, Saros could win 40 games. I really like him this year. I was really hoping that he'd fall a little bit on draft day and make him a little bit better value, but that obviously is not happening. So, like you guys said, if you have to be willing to pull the trigger on these guys if you want them. They go early, and you've got to pay a premium to get them. But obviously having Saros out there 66 times a year is easy. So you can kind of. I guess there's a couple ways of looking at it, right? Like if you draft these elite guys, you can maybe wait a little bit more because you can rely on these guys to be out there a lot. But then one injury to one of them and the whole house crumbles. So, Beebs, how do you feel about Juuse Saros at number 4?
I love it. And I think, well, maybe not love it. Obviously not as much as Oettinger because I had him at 4 instead of 3. But I think this is kind of where I draw a line on the next tier as far as goaltending goes. So if you do end up with one of these 4, I think you have what we'll call elite goaltending as one of your goaltenders. But for me, yes, he started 64 games last year, but he also lost 29 of those and only 135 lost 29. Jake Oettinger, on the other hand, started 53, 135, only lost 18. So those 29 games that Saros is losing, it just kind of worries me. Obviously, in all of them, he's not getting shelled. He's not, we don't know how his stats look. But with that said, usually losses don't turn into the best fantasy results. So for that reason, it's just the team in front is a little bit better, maybe a lot bit better. Dallas this year, we don't really know what Nashville is going to give us. They are a big question mark with these additions. They might actually be quite good. But yeah, it's just those losses that scare me a little bit. And they both kind of had relatively the same last 2 years, 919 in 2022-23, 906 for Saros in 23-24, where Oettinger had a 905. So we're kind of talking about both dudes having a bounce back year this year. And if anything, I'm expecting the young 25-year-old to bounce back a little bit more than still kind of young 29-year-old. I just can't believe Saros is 29.
He's been around forever. It is worth mentioning, though, Saros, similar to Oettinger, did catch a little bit of fire late in the season as well. He won 15 of his last 21 starts. So a bit of a sluggish start. 15 of his last 21 were wins, and he posted a 916 save percentage. So hopefully he kind of figured that out and comes into this season with kind of that form as opposed to what we saw early in the season. He was also obviously quite good in the postseason as well. They bowed out to the Vancouver Canucks, but he played very, very well. Juuse Saros, what do you got for us?
I would still have him in this spot, but I think where Saros gets a lot of his value from and where, it might be more enticing to go after him at this ADP is in points leagues because of how many games he plays. And the fact that I think the Predators will be very good this year, but they're not going to be the elite of the elite. He's led the league in saves for each of the last 2 years, which, as we know, is a big factor in points leagues as well. So that's why I think where you're really getting a lot of this value from in Saros. And who knows? I mean, they're projected for right around 100 points. So if he sees the same workload, he could very well end up leading the league in wins come, the end of the season. But yeah, it is just, he did play well to end the season last year. It was a long stretch to start the year where he was underperforming and hurting your splits in category leagues. So that combined on top of the fact that, like I said, I just like the idea of having the goal support of a Dallas in front of you is what dropped him to 4 for me. But certainly, as you said, one of the biggest workhorses in the league. And speaking of Scott Wedgwood, that shouldn't change at all this year with Wedgwood coming in to be the backup. Not expected him to steal any work from Saros. It'll just be interesting if their spot's a little more secure this season, if Saros does see as much work down the stretch. And maybe we see him closer to 60 starts this year than the 64 or 67 he's been at the last few years. Don't think that's super sustainable, especially for a guy who just signed to a super long-term contract, right? So, but yeah, like I said, in points leagues, he can end up being one of the most valuable goalies off the board.
Number 5 for us is Andrei Vasilevskiy of the Tampa Bay Lightning. I've got him at 5. D, you also have him at 5. Beebs the lowest on him at number 8. Vasilevskiy did not make his season debut until late November last year and still started 52 games. From that point on, he led all goalies in starts, was second in wins, but finished 38th in save percentage and 33rd in goals against average. Vasilevskiy still has Jonas Johansson behind him, so he should start like 75% of the games at least on a team that is tied for the 10th highest point projection in the sports books this year. Before I go to you, Beebs, because you have the lowest, I forgot to mention his current ADP is 36.4, which is the 6th goalie off the board. So we're slightly higher than consensus. We've been kind of in lockstep with ADP here so far. Things are about to get very, very different. But Beebs, you're the lowest on him. Are you scared away just by those splits last year?
Absolutely. Probably also the fact that I was one of the ones laying there getting absolutely burned by Vasilevskiy. It was getting hard to put him in most starts last year, which is crazy to say for someone who was just the number 1 goaltender off the board for like 10 years, maybe. Not that many, but give him 5. Still so impressive. But yeah, the 2.90 goals against and 900 save percentage both scare me a ton. I think Tampa's taken a step defensively back. They lost Sergachev, as we've talked about, and they really haven't added a defensive piece in there that impresses me. You're going to see Darren Radish and Nick Perbix likely be their third pair now. And now Ryan McDonough's back up in their top 4. And JJ Moser was the big piece that they got in the deal there. The JJ Moser Sergachev trade-off just isn't good enough for me to get excited about this guy, to think that he is going to have a bounce back year. I do think he'll do better than a 900 save percentage, but what scares me is you're going to put him in there for 68 to 70 of his starts, and for 30 of those, they're not going to be good starts for your fantasy team. And that can ruin weeks for you. Really scares me at that point. I'd almost rather have a guy who starts less on a better defensive team. They were 10th. They had the 10th most goals against last year. Tampa did. And as I mentioned, with their defense not getting much help, it really scares me. I will say though, in my notes, I even put, I'm probably being a little too hard on this guy, because every year he was putting up a 917, 918, 919 up until last year. So this is just me banking on, I guess, him not so much bouncing back to what he used to be. With that said, though, he could totally make me eat my words. We've seen him be the best goalie in the world multiple times. But for me, I'm a little bit scared about this Tampa defensive unit, and I guess that's why he fell down the board a bit for me here.
Yeah, I think I am a little bit higher. I mean, obviously by the rankings, but I'm just willing to chalk up more of his struggles last year to the back injury. Had that operation right around the start of the season, came back earlier than I think any of us expected him to, and then commanded a really heavy workload because they, weren't in a great spot while he was out, right? They kind of needed to just throw him back in there and give him his usual run, which is how, as Brock said, ended up still with 52 starts on the season. I think now the full offseason to recover. This was a guy who, like Hellebuyck, you could almost just bank on, as Beep said, settling somewhere between a 915 upwards of a 925 save percentage for the better part of almost a decade. So I'm willing to kind of, like I said, just chalk all those struggles last year up for the most part to the injury. The defensive core might not be as strong, sure, but they're still projected to get a ton of wins. I think the goal support is still going to be there. So I do think that he'll be better this year. I'm expecting a bounce back with those splits. And it'll be interesting to see what he can do now that he's had a full offseason to recover after, a pretty brutal injury and a pretty brutal workload last year.
Yeah, just so good for so long. It's hard to completely write him off after one bad year. And I do still think this team, and the sports books obviously still think this team is going to be pretty good this year. So I'm not ready to write him off quite yet. Alexandar Georgiev comes in at number 6 for us. Beebs, as our resident bias Avalanche fan, has him the highest at 5. D, you've got him at 6. I've got him the lowest at 9. I'm right in lockstep with ADPs, the 9th goalie off the board. His ADP is currently sitting at 49.2. Georgiev led the NHL in wins for the second straight season last year, but 2023-24 was not as pretty as the year previous. He was 35th in the league in goals against average and tied for 40th in save percentage with an .897. Another concern for me is just that he has more competition for starts this year than he did at the start of last year. Justice Noonan played extremely well during his fairly small sample size of 14 games with the Avalanche and will definitely be pushing Georgiev for some time this season. So to me, if Georgiev doesn't start 60-plus games, he's probably not going to threaten for the league lead in wins, and his splits just aren't good enough to salvage that if he isn't playing as much as he has in years past. So there is concern. I think the Avs are obviously a little bit scary as well. Like they're still a good team, don't get me wrong, but starting the year with no Lehkonen, starting the year with no Nichushkin, there is some concern there. From the sportsbook point of view, there's absolutely zero concern, no concern whatsoever. They have them as the second highest projected team in the league. So still a team that's going to win a shitload of games. If Georgiev is in there for 65 games, then sure, he could replicate what he's done the last, even just last year, and it'll be fine. But I'm concerned that he just won't see quite as many starts. Beebs, you're our Avs guy. Why do you like Georgiev at number 5?
Wishful thinking, I think, is it? That's certainly it. No, the league leader in wins past 2 seasons, obviously there. I'm not so much that nervous about Justice and Noonan taking starts if Georgiev plays good. Obviously, there is that threat there that if things kind of go bad off the bat, Colorado is in a position where they need to win now, so they're not gonna sit around if Georgiev's struggling. But as you mentioned, 78 wins in the last 2 years. I'm kind of looking back at the 2022-23 season. Last year was just kind of nothing seemed to bounce Georgiev's way, but in 2022-23, he had a .919 save percentage. He had 5 shutouts. He led the league in wins, as mentioned, and he had a 2.53 goals against average. If he can even bring that back to halfway there, if he can give you about a .910 to .912 save percentage, get the goals against to about a .275, and give you those wins like he has been, I think he holds his value here, and he's just a safe play. With that said, we haven't really seen him have that in him before. It could be a fluke season, the .919 from a few years ago. I still have a lot of questions about this guy, which is terrible when you're entering your 3rd season with a goaltender that you should be competing for the Stanley Cup with. But yeah, like I said, it's the wishful thinking of a bounce back for me. I think he's going to get some pretty safe starts though. If things go bad early on, they'll put him in against some of the weaker teams just to get him back. We kind of saw that happen last year. Just to give him his confidence back. And yeah, I think he's a sure bet for wins, and he's going to be dropping down a ton of people's draft boards when they look at that .897 save percentage last year and that .302 goals against average. So yeah, with the hopes that he improves just a wee bit, I that's why I have him right there. And I will admit it was this is a total toss up between some of the next names here, and it's clearly my bias that pushed him through that toss up. But yeah, these are, if you get any of these next couple names later in your draft, I'd be quite happy with them as my goaltender one.
Yeah, I just love the upside here, and I still expect him to get a ton of starts. I think he's going to have a lot of leeway coming out the gate. I'm honestly, I don't think he was as bad as he was last year, obviously, and I don't think he's quite maybe as good as he was the year before that. Career .908 save percentage. If he can deliver that, he'll hold on to the starting job, and he's still going to be right around there, leading the league in wins. Another guy who I think offers just a little bit more potential value in points leagues if he can maintain as strong of a hold on that starting job as he's had, because the splits aren't going to hurt you as much there. But having said all that, like a Noonan with where he's going in the draft, 155.5, we're talking about the 13th round, almost into the 14th round. That's a guy that I'm also looking to target at the back end of the drafts, because even if he makes it so he's getting around 35 starts, obviously it's going to really hurt Georgiev's value, but a Noonan will be a valuable start whenever he's in there. I'm just not convinced that they're going to be quick to hand him over the reins in such a crazy fashion. So still, I think the upside and having the goal support of the Avs, I'm not too worried about the injuries to those kind of complementary players. They've shown the ability to still score a ton of goals as long as the big three are healthy, which they are right now. So yeah, I like where the Avs are at heading into the year. Obviously, as you said, Brock, second highest projected win total, points total in the NHL. So whoever's playing goalie for them is going to carry a lot of value. And I do think that Georgiev will still see a huge amount of starts. And if he bounces back at all, his job's not going to be in any sort of jeopardy.
Yeah, I wrote up my favorite kind of sleepers, late round sleepers at each position at dailyfaceoff.com. And Justice Noonan made that list for the goaltenders. I do think, like you said, even if he sees 25 starts for a team that's as good as they are, he's going to have some value at the back of your drafts, especially in deeper leagues.
And if you could get Georgiev and Justice, that's a pretty nasty stack. You're going to get likely 50, 55 wins. So that's just something to think about.
50 to 55 wins. They are projected for 48.8. I'll give it to you. Sergei Bobrovsky comes in at number 7 for us. I've got him at 8. Beebs has him at 6. D's got him right where we've got him at number 7. And his ADP is number 7, currently going 42.2. 7th goalie off the board. Sergei Bobrovsky is coming off one of his best statistical seasons since arguably 2019. Bobrovsky won 36 games with a sparkling .237 goals against average and .915 save percentage, and had a league-leading 6 shutouts. The Panthers remained a top 5 team in the league, but Bobrovsky isn't as much of a workhorse as he used to be, and the reacclimation of Spencer Knight to this team will likely keep Bobrovsky under 60 starts for a 6th straight season. So, yeah, just like he used to be, obviously, like these other guys when he was younger, started 60, 65 games. Just doesn't see quite as many anymore, but still wins an absolute ton of them. D, where do you land here on Sergei Bobrovsky? Probably much of the same compared to last year?
Yeah, I think he's a little trickier. He kind of represents the volatility at the position. This is a guy that we've seen be, right along league average, even a little bit below league average. And then at the same time, just kind of in between those, sprinkle in some Vezina caliber seasons. So he's always a tricky one to forecast. But again, you're one of the best teams in the NHL. I'm not super concerned about Spencer Knight. I actually think Stolarz is a bigger threat to his playing time last year than what Knight will be this season. For all the hype that Knight's gotten as a prospect, he's never really shown it at the NHL level. So until that happens, I'm not going to factor it in a whole lot. And like I said, Stolarz performed brilliantly last year, and Bobrovsky's start still went up. It was the most he played as a Florida Panther. But yeah, his numbers year to year tend to be a little bit more volatile than these other elite guys that we're talking about. He's going to be 36 this season. So there are some concerns there, but I think it's a nice value for where he's going. This might be the earliest that I'd be looking to draft in a lot of leagues, depending on where he falls. If he drops probably just a little bit further is where I'm comfortable going after my first goaltender. So yeah, he's in that conversation for me. And again, it just comes down to the goal support and how good of a team he has in front of him. That's going to have the biggest driving factor and impact on his stats and his fantasy value at the end of the day.
Yeah, Bob is safe, and safe is sometimes good with goaltenders, especially as we've mentioned with them being such voodoo. So I would never mind getting a piece of him. I've owned him a bunch in the last couple of years. Usually ends up quite good. And Spencer Knight, it's amazing because Spencer Knight was getting drafted quite high just a few years ago before everything that obviously happened. But even with that said, he didn't necessarily tear it up in the AHL last year. They gave him a full season and bounced back, and he had only a .905 save percentage in 45 starts. So I don't think that they're as confident as they even were last year with Stolarz as their backup. For me, I don't see Bobrovsky losing any starts like compared to last year. And with that said, if he does exactly what he did last year, that would be perfect, and he would land right in this spot for me. I do think, again, he's a nice, you could throw him in there with Georgiev and with a few other names we're going to talk about. And I think he's a bit safer than Georgiev, but I do like the ceiling on Georgiev a bit more. So I guess that's why there's a difference here.
Yeah, I have Bobrovsky projected for 53 starts, and yeah, anywhere in that 53, 55 range would be plenty for a guy that is as good as he is on a good team. Good goalie, good team. Number 8 for us is Jeremy Swayman. Good goalie, good team. I've got him the highest at 6. You guys both have him at 9. ADP is actually 5. His ADP overall is 30.8. Obviously the big issue here with Swayman is the fact that he remains without a contract at the moment, an unsigned RFA, but he's the lead upside after the trade of Linus Ullmark to Ottawa. Over the last 3 seasons, Swayman has won 62.6% of his starts, a rate that would turn into 35 wins if he starts 55 games this season. During that 3-year stretch, Swayman is 4th in the NHL in goals against average and 6th in save percentage. We aren't going to talk too much about Jeremy Swayman at this point in the show. We're going to talk about him a little bit later when we get to our values, busts, and breakout. So stay tuned for some more Jeremy Swayman updates. Number 9 is Stuart Skinner. Beebs is the highest on him at 7. D's got him at 8. I've got him at 10. ADP is 48.5, which is the 8th goalie off the board. We've got him overall at 9. Skinner had a rocky start to the season last year, but was absolutely spectacular after Christmas, going 24-7-4 with a .917 save percentage. He had some issues in the playoffs as well, but settled in after getting pulled for Calvin Pickard and re-entering the Oilers crease. In his final 15 starts, posted a .914 save percentage. The Oilers have the highest projected point total in the NHL this year. Probably hard pressed to find a goalie with better goal support as well. So Skinner will be an elite option if he gets around 55 starts this season, which he did last year. Same goaltending duo there as well. Calvin Pickard, really has kind of found himself in Edmonton, but still not a very big threat at all to Stuart Skinner there. So D, he was your breakout pick last year. Kind of broke out. To me, it does still feel like this team and Stuart Skinner have kind of another level. I actually kind of wanted to do him as a breakout this year, but he did already kind of break out last year. But this does feel like a guy that has a chance to maybe finish top 3 at the position. Could be the number 1 goalie by the end of the year.
Yeah, if he can, maintain that level of play, as you said, that he did throughout the second half of the season, I do think he's still going to get a ton of work. Pickard, a solid backup, but I don't think anyone's looking at him as potentially leading this team into the postseason. I think even if Skinner struggles, like we saw last season, the focus will be on giving him the time and attention to get his game right. And still just, 25 will be 26 this season. So I still think there's some upside there. It's, he's not as consistent as some of these other guys that we've talked about, right? And that's why we have him ranked where he is, but the upside is obvious, right? And I think he actually comes with some pretty good value on draft day. But even if he delivers anything close to his career 909 save percentage, he's going to deliver plenty of fantasy value. And yeah, if he performs at the level that he did throughout the second half of last season, then he'll be one of the best goalies to own in fantasy hockey. So yeah, tons of goal support, as you said, tons of wins coming his way, and very little threat to a starting job. I think it's a safe pick with a lot of upside, and it's a really nice spot with where he's going in drafts.
Yeah, it's interesting too, right? Like if you look at his 2 years previous, 913 save percentage, pretty consistent, obviously. Then you look at the second half of last year, 917 save percentage. In the playoffs, 914 save percentage. To me, he's a guy that's going to just kind of settle into that 913 area, which is what it kind of looks like the type of goalie that he is. And that's going to be more than good enough to win just an absolute boatload of games. He's a guy that could certainly lead the league in wins this season with the amount of goal support that he's going to have because, he has not been totally consistent, but Beebs has kind of pointed out a few guys already in this episode where it's like, they're a lot younger than you think they are. And Stuart Skinner is probably one of those guys. He's been around for a little bit. He's going to be 26 years old in November. So still a guy kind of starting to find his way in the NHL. And if he settles in at 913 save percentage, he's going to be a guy that is going to be very, very good for fantasy this year. Beebs, anything to add quickly on Stuart Skinner?
He gives me all the feelings of Alexandar Georgiev. He's on a great team. He could give you anything from a 900 to a 915. And if he gives you the latter, you're going to be incredibly, incredibly happy, and you're going to get better than your draft stock. And if he doesn't, you're still probably going to get a pretty decent value out of him in the other categories, which is why I really like him. For me, I even wrote here, I would love to put him higher, but I just need to see him do it for a full season. As you mentioned, his last 42 games, getting 25 wins out of those with a 917 save percentage, that's his last 37 games. So 25 wins in 37 games with a 917, that's top 3 goaltender for us. If he produces that at an 82 game pace, proving you could do it for half the season, that's a good chunk of the year. And I would love to just see him pull it all together. This has all the feels of a massive year for Edmonton after last year. And yeah, I think he could be pushing for a top 5 next year if he does put it together. But I think you nailed it. He might be a 913 goalie his whole career, but if you get that, that's incredible with the team in front of him, and they're going to score a ton of goals. So yeah, I don't mind Skinner at all. That's why I guess I had him higher.
Do you mention that you weren't a guy that usually starts to go after these elite goalies? Is Skinner kind of in that range where you start to feel pretty comfortable? He's going right now right at the 4-5 turn. Are you comfortable being like, okay, here's a time where I'm going to make my move? I've picked up, now 4 forwards or forward and defenseman, and I can settle in with Stuart Skinner as my number one.
Yeah, I think so. If he's there, right, I think there'll be some leagues where he goes even earlier, and then I might even, fall off the position for a little bit longer. He's going to be really my last chance to get one of these guys that I think can be really elite. There's still a lot of volatility that comes with the position, and it's still a pretty big investment at that point. I think it's fair for where he's going, though. So yeah, that's really the start of it. But and just again, it kind of comes down to preference, but. I don't like having my whole fantasy season fall apart because one starter gets injured or one starter just has a down year for whatever reason. So I'm not going to invest a whole lot, right? Like if I take Skinner, then I'm going to wait probably another 7 or 8 rounds at least before I look at taking another goaltender. It's a way to really shore up the position to get to the point where I can take some of these guys that might be able to, eat into their starters' workload a bit more than people expect on some good teams, or just some guys that are maybe in a 1A, 1B situation, and you're not going to be hurt so much by the fact that they're not starting every game because you have a workhorse on a really good team and a guy like Skinner. So, yeah, I think he can easily deliver, as we've said, some splits and a stat line at the end of the day that's on par or pretty close to it with these guys that are going, 2 or 3 rounds ahead of him. So, he's in a really nice spot with the draft. It's probably Skinner or bust for me at that position or that spot in the draft. Otherwise, I'm going to wait a little bit longer because I don't love the couple of other guys that are going around him. But yeah, I think for as safe as the position can be versus ADP, I think Skinner is that.
Coming in at number 10, wrapping up our consensus top 10, is Ilya Sorokin of the New York Islanders. I'm the highest on him at 7. Beebs is the lowest at 12. D, you've got him at 10, which is where he is going at the moment. 10th goalie off the board, ADP of 52.2. Sorokin, it seems weird to have Sorokin ranked this low, but he just was not great last year and gave up some starts to Semyon Varlamov, who was very good, particularly early in the season. He finished the year with a 301 goals against average and a 909 save percentage, which is very unlike him. The 3 seasons before last, he had a 234 goals against average and a 924 save percentage. So to me, D, you kind of talked about like in this range is where you'd start to look to draft a goalie. To me, if you don't get Skinner, I think Sorokin is a great value this year. I think his ADP feels a little bit of an overreaction to last year because he was really just so good in his 3 years previous. The Islanders are slightly below average according to the sportsbook, but that's really nothing new to Ilya Sorokin. That's kind of the same quality of team that he's played on his entire career. So yes, Semyon Varlamov is still there. Yes, Semyon Varlamov is still going to steal some starts, but Sorokin, even in his worst season, ended up seeing 55 starts a season ago. It's going to be interesting to see how Patrick Waugh kind of handles this goaltending situation. We saw Patrick Waugh be a little bit reluctant to go to Sorokin quite as much down the stretch, so that gives me a little bit of hesitancy. But at the end of the day, the numbers that I laid out prior to last season are unbelievable. A 924 save percentage, 234 goals against average. He's still an elite goalie, and if Patrick Waugh feels like he's not going to play him all the time, then that's ludicrous. Like, he needs to be your number one guy. He's your best goalie, and I am perfectly comfortable with taking him at 52 ADP. Him and Skinner, to me, are the two kind of best goalie values in those early to middle rounds, and I really like Sorokin. But Beebs, you have him the lowest at 12. I'm just curious here. So you were scared off by Vasilevskiy's splits dipping. Not scared off by Georgiev's, though. Are you scared off by Sorokin's?
Yeah, I mean, I'm having a tough time putting anyone. Yeah, I do get what you're doing there. Having a tough time though putting anyone in my top 10 who gave me one start in last year's fantasy playoffs across all 3 weeks. That's leaving such a sour taste in my mouth. I knew managers were getting to the point where they're going to drop this guy last year because Wall went so heavy on Varlamov at the end. That scares me. Realistically, if you would have grabbed Connor Ingram off the waiver wire last year, you would have gotten a better season than you did from Ilya Sorokin. And those are the type of things that make it seem like, I don't know. It just scares me. We talked about how much a team around you can make a big difference. If the Islanders were this wagon, then I would be like, wow, this guy's like jump in, get all in. But it seems like the 2 years where he had the 925, the 924, he had to basically give every little thing he had. And at the same time, he only ended up with 57 wins, even though he was stopping every puck that came in his direction. So when we're talking about a top 10 area here, I guess some of the other names I liked more had better teams in front of them, had a more chance to actually play in the fantasy playoffs, and just a little bit more not reliable. I mean, because he was, as you mentioned, he was reliable before last year. But yeah, it really scares me out in Islander country. And I think anyone who drafted him is not going to touch him this year. So maybe he will be there for people as he drops.
I think the one major red flag and major concern is just the fact that he also underwent back surgery this offseason. He's not on the ice yet in training camp. There's obviously question marks about his availability. They make it sound like he's going to be fine. He's going to be ready for close to the start of the season. But this is something we saw. We just talked about it with Vasilevskiy, right? If you miss any portion of the start of the season, you might not find your full level until later in the year. That being said, if this back injury that required surgery held him back in any capacity last year, it is the reason that he played poorly and now it's fixed, maybe it's a bounce back. There's two ways of looking at it. Obviously, there is some concern there, but the ADP and the concern seems to be baked in, and I'm perfectly fine taking this gamble. I'm on one end, Beebs is on the other. Where do you fall?
I'm not super high on Sorokin. I just feel like, you said obviously he's their best goalie. I think he's their best player, which is kind of an issue here in fantasy hockey. He's not going to get a ton of goal support. And to Beebs' point, even when he performs at, the peak of his powers, the wins aren't really going to be there. So I do think this is a guy that can give you more value in category leagues because, the splits over his career have been really, really good. They've been elite. But he's just not going to rack up the wins. They did say the injury was something he suffered in the offseason, or at least that's how they phrased it. So I don't know. It's a little bit scary, especially when you consider, obviously, like I said, the impact that it might have, we don't know exactly what the injury was, but a back injury to Vasilevskiy last year and him coming back and not quite looking like himself after a procedure pretty close to the start of the season. It just gives me a lot of pause when I just don't love the situation that he's at to begin with. So this is part of why I said, right? To me, it's kind of Skinner or bust at that spot. I'm not as high on Sorokin. Like I said, category leagues, maybe you can make a stronger pitch there. But yeah, I just don't think he has that big of an upside to kind of justify burning an early-ish round pick on him.
That will do it for our top 10. To give you some names that just narrowly missed that top 10, Jacob Markstrom. He was traded to the New Jersey Devils in the offseason. He comes in at number 11. Beebs is the highest on him at 10. D is at 11. I am at 12. Linus Ullmark comes in at number 12. Another goalie that was traded this offseason. He goes to the Ottawa Senators. I've got him at 11. Beebs has him at 11. D has him at 12. Joseph Woll of the Toronto Maple Leafs comes in at number 13. I've got him at 13. Beebs has him at 12. D has him at 15. Aiden Hill comes in at number 14. I've got him at 14. So does D. Beebs has him a little bit lower at 16. And Pyotr Kochetkov comes in at number 15. Me and Beebs have him at 15. D has him a little bit lower at number 16. So there you go. That is our consensus top 15 voodoo goalies. We are now going to move into our values, busts, and breakouts at the goalie position. We are going to start with the values. And I'm going to go first because my value has the lowest average draft position, and that is Tristan Jarry of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Jarry enters the season as the number one netminder for a fringe playoff team, but has competition for starts from Alex Nedeljkovic. Jarry finished very poorly last season, but has reportedly shown up to camp in the best shape he's ever been in, according to head coach Mike Sullivan. Whether or not that has an actual impact this season is up for debate. But overall, Jarry's 2023-24 season wasn't as bad as it looked from the surface. He had a quality start in 60.4% of his games, which ranked 15th among qualified starters. The issue was when he was bad, he was terrible. He gave up 4+ goals in 14 of his 51 games. It's 27.5% of the time if you're keeping score at home. However, Jarry was still able to post the 24th best goal saved above expected per 60, ahead of names like, you ready? Juuse Saros, Jake Oettinger, Andrei Vasilevskiy, Stuart Skinner, Ilya Sorokin, and Pyotr Kochetkov, all who are going much earlier than Jarry. He's not the safest pick on draft day and will probably be frustrating to own at times if he's giving up 4 goals 14 times a year. But he's being drafted as the number 26 goalie so far this year. And to me, he can drastically outperform that. This is still a Pittsburgh Penguins team that's going to score plenty of goals. They should be fine. They're not going to be the best team in the league, certainly not going to be the worst. Jarry, I think, has a bit of a bounce back year. I don't think Nedeljkovic is any threat, really, any true threat. If this team wants to be great, they're going to need to ride Tristan Jarry. So, the ADP is outrageously low at 147. So, you're talking if my math is correct, that is the 13th round. So, you said you can wait on goalies, D, and Jarry, and some of these other names we're about to talk about are perfect examples of why. D, you can go next. You have the next lowest ADP of the group.
Sure. I'm going to talk about a guy who got a lot of love from us last year, Joey Daccord, ADP of 157.4, so just into that 13th round. But Daccord really was a bit of an unsung hero of many fantasy teams last year, providing a really unexpected source of fantasy value down the stretch. Enjoyed a breakout campaign, posted a .916 save percentage and 2.46 goals against average across 50 appearances while saving 16.8 goals above expected. That injury to Philip Grubauer initially is what opened the door for him, but he did secure the starting job off that, proceeded to vastly outplay him down the stretch as well, and is certainly the betting favorite to see the lion's share of the work once again this season. Despite that, he's plummeted down draft boards this preseason, currently going in the 14th round on average. And I get it. It's not the sexiest place. Playing for the Kraken may not provide him with a steady source of goal support and wins, but that downside more than baked into this ADP. Seattle was also one of the more underrated defensive teams across the NHL last season, finished the season 7th in the league in both scoring chances allowed and expected goals against per 60 at 5v5. So really solid defensive structure, should allow Daccord to continue to shine and return above average splits all season long. There is a chance Grubauer could eat into his workload if he's able to reclaim his past form, but we're pretty far past that at this point. He's done nothing but underwhelm as a member of the Kraken. He's gone on 3 seasons now, posting an .893 save percentage across 130 appearances with the team. I think people are expecting this workload to be a split, I really don't expect that to be the case. I think Daccord will hold on to his position from last season as the unquestioned number 1 goaltender in Seattle. You really, it's him and Jarry. Aside from that, you're going to have a hard time finding a bona fide number 1 starting goaltender near this point in the draft. It's nothing but timeshares around here, at least to start the season. And the Kraken's consistent ability to limit opportunities of the opposing team should make Daccord a sneaky source of fantasy value at the position once again this year. I think he's an excellent target for anyone that's looking to fade the position like me early on in drafts.
I think that this is a difficult timeshare to really nail down. I do think that Daccord's likely going to be the guy that sees the lion's share of the load, but it is difficult. I do think it's going to be fairly close, but one indication we've got from the sports books is that Daccord's over-under for wins this season set at 21.5, while Grubauer's is set at 17.5. So you'd have to expect that Daccord will definitely see a little bit more work than Grubauer, but it is a difficult one to kind of nail down just because at the end of the day, one of these guys is getting paid and one of them isn't really getting paid. So
yeah, if the performance is anywhere near as drastically as different as it was last year, though, again, I do think it's going to start out that way with Grubauer seeing, a good amount of starts, but if it continues on the pace that we saw last year, they're going to have no choice but to lean on Daccord more. He was just frankly a whole lot better than Grubauer last season. And again, Grubauer is going on 3 seasons now being terrible in Seattle.
Yeah, and if they want to be a playoff team, if they want to make the playoffs, it's going to be on the back of Joey Daccord most likely. So, he's one guy like that. Like I said, that was a timeshare I had a hard time trying to figure out and trying to rank. But Daccord's definitely a guy that even if it starts 50-50, can definitely separate himself by the second half of the year. Beebs, give us your value pick on draft day.
Yeah. Before I do that, let me just say, it's another year where we're looking at Seattle goaltending saying, just give us something, just a little bit, because the team in front is just very solid defensively. So whoever does get those starts, just hold it down, lock it down, please, one of you, and make it easier for us fantasy guys. My value pick, though, I can't believe I'm saying this because I do believe he might have been my breakout pick last year on a completely different team. It's Joonas Korpisalo out in Boston. which is kind of funny to say because obviously Jeremy Swayman's in Boston, but his ADP is currently 173. He's basically going undrafted in most leagues, which I think is a little bit crazy because you can be very sneaky at the beginning of your fantasy season right here, especially if this Jeremy Swayman contract talk bleeds into December. Boston has 26 games before December 1st. And if they need a starter, Korpisalo is going to be their guy. We've seen them be a very good defensive team in previous years. They finished sixth in the league last year in goals against. And if he could take a quarter of those starts to start the year, you could steal some early wins in the goaltending category. And by the time December 1 rolls around, you'll likely be able to make some adjustments through free agency that can help you if you have ridden Korpisalo. And I could see him, if Swayman does stay out, being a goaltender one for those, say, 26 games, or a fantasy goaltender one. Korpisalo obviously had a down year last year. He had an .890 save percentage in Ottawa. Everything kind of went wrong, but he's now in Boston. He's a year removed from a .916 save percentage and just a few years removed from a .911. If he could give you about a .910 right now and lead Boston's net, you're going to have him for about a 30-year fantasy year as a starter if Swayman does not return. Granted, if Swayman signs tomorrow, just scrap this whole segment, act like you never heard it, and move along. But no, we've seen Swayman and Ullmark both hold fantasy values while working together the last couple of years. And I think even if Swayman is forced to miss any sort of time, Korpisalo is going to be a net, and they're not going to force Swayman directly into the fire. He's already missed training camp. If he misses a month, misses 2 months, this is your starting goaltender, and he has to get up to speed with everything going on around him. And if we see anything close to a 50-50 split, even at the beginning with Korpisalo, you could still get your value. So if you're riding into January and you've gotten 20 to 25 starts off a guy you drafted with your last pick in the draft for one of the best teams in the NHL that we've seen in previous years, I think you're laughing about that value, and you can figure out kind of the rest of your season from there, or maybe trade Korpisalo to the Swayman owner, let him have a little two-headed monster, or get Swayman and have your own little two-headed monster. Yeah, I really like doing this. It usually leads to some, you got to make some solutions later on, but that's what we're here for. That's why we're a fantasy podcast. We can help you for those type of things. So as long as Jeremy Swayman's not signed, Boston needs a number one. Korpisalo has proven he can do it, and I will gladly, if I have terrible goaltending, I will very gladly take him at the end of my drafts and just take this chance to maybe save my goaltending, put the Band-Aid on it for a couple months. And Korpisalo is a good goaltender, regardless of what happened last year.
I'd be shocked if Swayman isn't signed by the start of the season. They did say, or like they made it sound like the start of the season was kind of like a deadline as opposed to the start of training camp. So I think we could see a solution here in the next couple of weeks. But even if we do, are we 100% sure that Jeremy Swayman is just all of a sudden going to go from a guy who's never played more than 43 games to starting 60 games? Like, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Korpisalo is still going to have a play here, and he's going to play 25 games, maybe 30 30 to 35 if Swayman's there the whole year. And I still think Korpisalo is going to have some value late in the draft. If he's your number 3 goalie, he's still going to have value. That's a good team. It's a good defensive team. Goalies just go there and they play unbelievable. It's just how it works. We saw Linus Ullmark do it. Korpisalo, when he was with the Kings, he posted some good numbers. So I do think there's some value there, but I would be stunned if Swayman isn't signed before the start of the season. But I don't think you can totally scrap that segment because I think
it still applies.
Still some good nuggets in there.
Especially in those deep leagues. If you're in ones where you're even starting to go after backup goaltenders, he's definitely one of the better ones if we're talking splits. So, yeah. Go ahead.
Breakouts. Let's get to D's breakout. He is the lowest ADP of the group.
We're going to talk about Logan Thompson, ADP 147.1, so right near the start of the 13th round again. Capitals did move on from Darcy Kuemper in the offseason, but they didn't exactly give a vote of confidence in Charlie Lindgren when they sent a pair of third-round picks to the Golden Knights in exchange for Logan Thompson. Lindgren did perform well last season, obviously superiorly outplayed Kuemper, wrestled the starting job away from him. But he was far from the most consistent goalie in the league and doesn't exactly boast a sparkling track record. Last year, first time in his career that he made more than 31 appearances in a season. And he brought in a middling .906 save percentage into the 23-24 season before posting that respectable .911 a season ago. Thompson, on the other hand, owns a .912 save percentage across his career, made a career high 46 appearances a season ago. I think at worst, this will be a shared crease on a team with playoff aspirations. And at best, I think Thompson continues to perform in an extended role. Lingard returns to his role as a backup that he served throughout most of his career. I expect Thompson to hold up his end of the bargain either way, which is why I feel really good about his chances of breaking out as a top 10 or top 15, fantasy netminder this season if he is able to wrestle that job away. And yeah, let's just be real, right? The assets the Capitals gave up to acquire him suggest that they see him as their at least short-term to middle-term future at the position. Whether that potential gets recognized this year or not is probably going to depend on the performance of Charlie Lindgren. But even if Thompson is relegated to that 1A, 1B situation, he should still easily return value on his ADP of 147.1. So just another obvious target for me if you're opting to fade the position early in some of this late round value that you can find at goalie.
Yeah, I love the Logan Thompson pick. Tristian Jarry, Logan Thompson, two guys in those late rounds that I'm definitely interested in without completely punting the position. My other goalie that I really like targeting in those rounds or a couple rounds later is Dustin Wolf of the Calgary Flames. Wolf is going to be given every opportunity to break out this season because someone has to start games for the Flames after they traded Jacob Markstrom to the New Jersey Devils, and it is most likely going to be Dustin Wolf who gets the lion's share of the work. His only competition for starts is Dan Vladar, who owns an 888 save percentage in the last two seasons with the Flames. The Flames do, however, have only the 27th highest projected point total according to the sports books, so Wolf will have his work cut out for him. But the Flames should still be pretty solid defensively. They, have a nice shutdown center and a guy like Mikael Backlund. Their blue line's still pretty decent. They were around league average in terms of expected goals against last year. So I don't think even if he's not winning a ton of games, he's not going to just completely blow your splits out of the water. And when you look at Wolf's career track record in the AHL, the WHL, the numbers are elite. They're too difficult to ignore. And there's a reason they didn't bring anybody else in to battle with him. They're happy with Vladar as a backup, and Dustin Wolf's going to start probably 50-plus games this year. And yeah, he's given every chance to be the breakout this year. We'll just see if he can actually take the reins and run with it. So I like Dustin Wolf as my breakout. Beebs, who do you get?
Yeah, I just looked at Dustin Wolf's AHL numbers, and I'm still absolutely floored here. But I went with someone who I'm kind of also floored with where he's being drafted, and this is Ivan Fedotov out in Philadelphia, a rookie netminder, and one you might have heard of last year because he made some waves because the dude is an absolute skyscraper. He is 6'8", a monster, and he's really not being drafted at all right now. He's just being taken around 184 ADP, so basically off the board. But as mentioned before the show started, there's only 64-ish or so goalies we have to choose from, and I had to choose a breakout, and this tower stood out for me. Last year, we watched Fedotov struggle. He only got 3 starts, but that was after coming over from the KHL in kind of a crazy situation. Unexpected even that he got into action. So I think it was kind of a bonus. So I would not take his 811 save percentage that he put up in 3 games last year. I wouldn't take that too strongly. One thing that I love for Fedotov and for his breakout is the talent around him is just not that good. We saw Samuel Ersson get handed the reins last year after the Carter Hart situation. Ersson only put up an 890 save percentage, which, as we were talking about with Dan Vladar, that's just not really scary. And as they say in Miracle, it's anybody's crease with goals, that many goals going in. And I think it's going to be Fedotov's crease eventually here. The Flyers missed the playoffs by only 4 points last year, and that's something that could have changed if Fedotov would have taken some of those starts instead of Ersson, and he would have been on the team. And I think that's going to come around if Ersson doesn't play well this year. He's a new goalie in Flyerland, and I don't necessarily love Flyers goalies in fantasy, but I do love what he did when he was in the KHL. He's currently 27 years old, so he's not a young buck, but when he was in the KHL, he had a 914, a 919, and a 925 save percentage in the last 3 seasons, playing for CSKA Moskova, who's not necessarily an elite team in the KHL. The last player who jumped over and had success like this was Igor Shesterkin, but Shesterkin had a 953 and a 937 in 2 years in the KHL on a much better team. Yeah, those are real numbers, a 953. But with that said, if I can get a Shesterkin light out in Philly, and if this team puts it a little bit more together, I would be so happy at this point. And Philly's also a team that's taking a pretty big step forward defensively as far as young talent. Cam York's a year older. Jamie Drysdale's a year older, and Igor Zamala is another one who's going to be taking a big step. We saw Rasmus Ristolainen, a show favorite, not play a lot of games last year. He looks to be healthy in camp this year. That's a huge towering force in the back end. These are all things that could help make it so that the starter in Philly has something better than an .890 save percentage. So for me, it's Ivan Fedotov out in Philly. I'm a little excited to see how it goes. I think I'm more just intrigued by someone this big. The last time we saw someone like this, it was Ben Bishop, I believe, who's just a monster, did some pretty good things. So yeah, I'll take Fedotov if I have an extra spot on my roster, or if, my goalies fall apart or something.
Early indications from camp are that he looks a lot more like the goalie they were expecting than the goalie that they got for a brief point last year. So yeah, I don't think there's much competition. He's at the very least probably heading into the season in a 50-50 split situation. And he's a guy that could kind of break through and break out this year. And at that ADP, he's in literally no risk, high reward pick. So I like Fedotov a lot. I think it's a good selection. I don't know about Shesterkin light, but you never know. Okay.
Walmart Shesterkin. There we go.
We promised that we would talk about Jeremy Swayman a little bit more later in the show. D, now's your chance.
I don't think it's a surprise if, I've shown a lot of disdain towards burning early draft capital on goaltenders. So I was going to look to pick off one of those guys to talk about here. And Swayman is the pretty obvious choice right now. I'm going to try not to mimic too much what Beebs said in his breakdown of Korpisalo, but obviously this choice directly tied to Swayman and the contract holdout that he's in the midst of with the Bruins. Pierre LeBrun reported today that while both sides are looking to get a long-term extension done for the restricted free agents, they remain far apart on an average annual value. And I don't know what to make of this internal deadline when you're so far apart. It's weird that would get out if you're, pretty steadfast on not giving him the term or the money that he's looking for. So I don't know if that means they're going to look at other options, potentially moving him. Who knows, right? I think everything's up in the air at this point if they are as far apart as the report suggests. Of course, there's always the possibility that Swayman continues holding out past the season opener. He's been pretty steadfast. The agent's been pretty steadfast in all the reports that have come out this summer. So it wouldn't be as big of a shock to me, Brock, if that's how it ends up playing out. Scenario which would obviously be disastrous for the Bruins, but probably more so for fantasy managers that ponied up to play that high draft capital to secure Swayman in the middle of the third round. And drafting a goalie that high comes with plenty of risk as is due to the volatile nature of the position. I think you add all this additional risk, makes him a pretty obvious fade. We've seen that ADP drop even about half a round over the past week or so. So it's already happening. And you don't got to look too far back to see some history here. Restricted free agents in the past executing extended holdouts is really their only form of leverage in this sort of situation. Obviously, most famously was William Nylander, signed just hours before that December 1st deadline. If the Bruins are unable to come to an agreement with Swayman before December 1st, of course, he'd be ineligible to play during the 24-25 season. I don't think anyone's expecting it to come to that. But I don't see why, the Bruins wouldn't look at that and say, if we can stand our ground, the Leafs got a pretty friendly number at the end of the day for Nylander on that first contract. It did work out for them in the end. They survived it. So it's going to come a lot to, if he is holding out to begin the start of the season, how does Korpisalo perform, right? That's going to sway the leverage pretty severely either way. If he's struggling, then Swayman's camp holds all the leverage. If he's playing well, then really what do they have to hold out on, right? So that's really going to be what it all comes down to. I think it's a messy situation from a fantasy perspective. Any holdout at all would have a pretty severe impact on his performance. Obviously, in the early season, I agree with Beebs. I don't think they rush him into starting, 75% of the games, especially when, as you alluded to, Brock, he's never done that before. And even when they get him back, I agree. I don't think that he is just going to all of a sudden be a 60-start guy. They've done really well splitting the time between their goaltenders a lot more evenly than most teams have in the past. I think there's just far too much risk to justify spending that kind of draft capital on Swayman. I think he'll continue to fall down the draft boards as we get closer to opening night if he keeps holding out. And again, as someone who's generally against spending that early draft capital at the position as is, there's really no way I end up with any sort of Swayman stocks this season.
Yeah, the real issue is that, when he's been in the crease, he's been absolutely unbelievable. And if he does sign, for the start of the season, and you get him at a bit of a discounted price because of the holdout, or right now the holdout, then he could be a steal. But at the ADP currently, it is just a terrible situation and one worth avoiding. I've already dropped him a full round in my rankings, and the longer this goes, the more he's going to drop. It's just going to keep happening with ADP as well because there is just far too much risk. And speaking of risk with a goaltender, my fade is Thatcher Demko because for much of the same reasons, there's just a lot of uncertainty here. He's going, luckily, 30 picks later, and that's an ADP that keeps dropping as well. 30 picks later than Swayman, that is. His current ADP is 60.4. But honestly, this is all about the injury, and his ADP is likely going to continue to drop. It's already moving a bit. But for a 5th or 6th round pick, it's scary for a guy with so much uncertainty. The Canucks and Demko have said this is an uncommon injury, and they've been very hush-hush about his rehab. The quotes today or yesterday were like that he had another good day, and that's all we talk about is good days. It's just he just needs to keep piling on good days. And it's just like, what does this even mean? Like, no, where is he at? How is he doing? Like, it's just very weird. So to me, he could wind up similar to Swayman being a value pick if he falls late enough because of these concerns. But if he ends up being healthy for most of the season, obviously, but it's just not a risk that I'm willing to take. Because now they've signed Kevin Lankinen. They have 2 capable goalies in Seeloft and Lankinen. And even if Demko, let's say, misses a month or 2 months, and when he gets back, they're going to likely be very cautious with his workload to ensure that he is ready for the playoffs because this is a team with Stanley Cup aspirations that need him for a deep playoff run. So even when he comes back, I don't imagine that we're going to see a typical Thatcher Demko workload given the fact that they've got a 3-headed monster that it seems like they're going to carry 3 goalies all year. So, Seeloft's can obviously go down. Him and his agent both said they want to be in the NHL this year. See how it plays out. But as much as I'm probably not having any Swayman on my teams this year at ADP 30, I'm definitely not having any Demko at ADP 60 either. So, Beebs, you went a little bit of a different route. Not a guy who doesn't have a contract or not a guy that doesn't have an injury designation. Who is your fade this year?
Yeah, I'm bold. I'll say that. But I I went with probably the guy with the most fun name in the NHL, and that's Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Some eerily similarities to my bust last year, who was Devon Levi, for those of you counting at home, and we'll get into this. So this one kind of floors me that this guy's going so high. He's not necessarily he's in a competition for his starting role. He doesn't necessarily have a lock on it, and he's playing for Buffalo. I'll remind you guys of that. We haven't seen Buffalo. Buffalo hasn't given us any reason to have confidence in their starters in previous years. Yeah, UPL had an impressive, probably his first career impressive season last year. He had a 27, 22, and 4 record, a 9-10 save percentage, and 5 shutouts. That ranked him 16th best in the NHL in save percentage, but that's just after a year where he had an 892 and really struggled and battled the puck. The 9-10 might be more what we're seeing and more what he is as an NHL starter. But for me, what scares me is the exact guy I brought up right off the bat, Devon Levi, who's sitting in his wings waiting to take that role. Last year, Levi's ADP was 92.8. As I mentioned, this year, UPL's is 93.5. So those are incredibly, incredibly close. And we've already forgotten about Levi, which is wild. He had one of the highest ceilings going into last year. Obviously, some things happened and they proved that they could send him to the AHL. But if we were so high on him last year, why wouldn't we be a little bit higher on him this year? If there's a 50-50 split in Buffalo and you used your first goaltender pick to get UPL, I don't think you're going to get very much value. And there's some splits on better teams that are a little bit safer that I'd much rather go with. The reason I kind of have him as, say, we'll call him a bust here, is just some of the other names going around him. Linus Ullmark is going just a couple picks in front of him. I personally would rather have Linus Ullmark all day. Jordan Binnington's going a couple picks after him. I think the safety and the security of Binnington and just the ability to been there, done that of a 9-10 save percentage before is a lot more enticing for me and something that I'd be willing to take a risk on instead of UPL. For me, it's just the talent of Levi sitting behind him is so scary. Yes, UPL might have been their starter last year, but there's nothing stopping them from just changing the reins up again this year. He was given a contract last year, but it wasn't anything that would have given him the confidence of, oh, you're our starter for years to come. And yeah, I think UPL is being taken way too high off the board. I kind of expect him around the 120 area. But yeah, if he does start, if he gets 50 games, which I think is probably his ceiling of starts, I still don't think you get the value that you want at 93.5 in your draft. So I'll be staying away from UPL this year if people are taking him that high. But hopefully everyone just listens and lets them fall. Whatever. Let me stack Buffalo goalies. Who knows?
You're either going to fade him completely or just stack up all the Buffalo goalies. One of the two options.
No in between.
That's going to do it for Season 10, Episode 6. It's also going to do it for our Fantasy Hockey Positional Preview episodes. We absolutely love doing these shows, and it's been another fun year of them. We still don't have 100% certainty just of what's coming next week. I will say that in the regular season, eventually we are going to be transitioning back to one episode per week. They will be released on Thursday morning, so keep an eye on that. We might stick with 2 for next week. We're just not 100% sure on our schedule just yet, so we will keep you posted. Follow us on Twitter at DFO Podcast, and we will see you guys back here next week.
Pour one out for the positional previews.
Peace.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.